I wasn't supposed to be home until Saturday night. The trip had been planned down to the hour, and Jenna knew I'd be gone for 4 full days, Thursday through Sunday. It was just another routine conference, hotel breakfasts, keynote speakers, endless panels, and networking events where you're expected to smile like you're not exhausted. But then the last day's agenda got canceled. Something about the main speaker backing out last minute, a corporate reshuffle, I don't even know. The point is, I suddenly had an open Friday, and instead of wasting it in a bland hotel room, I figured I'd fly home and surprise her. I didn't tell Jenna. I thought it'd be a nice change of pace, a little spontaneous. We hadn't had much of that lately. Life had become a slow treadmill of errands and half-hearted date nights. I missed how we used to be. I guess I thought coming home early might be the spark we needed. The house was quiet when I pulled up the driveway. Not eerie quiet, just settled. Like the air had adjusted to someone else's rhythm. It was just after 7 p.m. and the sky was that kind of dusky purple that makes everything look softer, more forgiving. I remember pausing on the porch for a second, just taking it in. I hadn't told anyone I was back in town. This moment felt like it belonged to me. The front door wasn't locked. That struck me as odd, but not alarmingly so. Jenna was forgetful with things like that sometimes. I pushed the door open, and that's when I got hit by the first red flag, something I didn't recognize, not right away. A scent, thick and slow in the air. Wine. Red wine. And food, something buttery like garlic bread or roasted chicken. Something home-cooked. We hadn't cooked a real dinner together in weeks. Lately, it was mostly takeout containers and cereal bowls at midnight. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me quietly. The lights were on in the kitchen. There were 2 wine glasses on the table. Both had lipstick marks. One of them, mine, was usually the taller stemless one Jenna always left out for me when we drank together. But these were both hers. Short-stemmed. Delicate. Half-full. Next to them, a white ceramic plate sat with just crumbs on it. Something had been served, probably for 2. There was only 1 fork in the sink, but I noticed a second napkin, crumpled slightly like it had been folded and used. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the table. My bag still over my shoulder. My shoes still on. I scanned every inch of that kitchen like it might speak to me. Something about the whole setup felt incomplete. Like a story that cut to black too early. I didn't even want to jump to conclusions. I wasn't that guy. But there was no mistaking the feeling that crawled up my back like ice. I heard movement upstairs. A door creaked open, light footsteps padding across the hardwood floor. Then the staircase creaked, and Jenna appeared, hair damp, tied loosely in a bun, wearing a white bathrobe I hadn't seen before. She stopped when she saw me mid-step, her hand resting on the banister like she needed a second to steady herself. "Scott," she said, voice tight with disbelief but no real panic. "You're back." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Caught an earlier flight. Figured I'd surprise you." Her face shifted. Not fear. Not guilt. Just recalibration. Like she was rearranging a few mental files. "Well, that is a surprise," she said with a little smile. "I wish you told me. I would have cleaned up." "Don't worry about it," I said, trying not to look back at the table. "Looks like you already had a nice evening." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the kitchen, almost imperceptibly. Just enough for me to catch it. She descended the last few stairs, cinching her robe a little tighter as she did. "Oh," she said casually, "yeah. I opened a bottle of wine. Thought I'd have a little self-care night. Cooked something, watched that new drama you hate. You know, girl time with myself. 2 glasses. She didn't flinch. Not even a twitch. I poured a second before I decided I didn't want it. I guess I forgot to put it away. Her explanation was so quick, so clean, it unsettled me more than if she'd stumbled over it. She walked past me and into the kitchen like it was nothing, grabbing the 2 glasses and heading for the sink. "You must be tired," she said over her shoulder. "I can make you something. Or reheat what I made." I didn't answer right away. I stood there, watching her from behind. Her posture was relaxed, her shoulders loose. She didn't look like someone who had been caught doing anything at all. "I'm good," I said finally. "Ate at the airport." She turned back around, that same polite smile on her lips. "Well, let me know if you need anything." She leaned in and gave me a kiss on the cheek. I caught a hint of perfume I didn't recognize. Lighter. Floral. Not the musky vanilla she'd worn since college. I said nothing, just nodded. She disappeared upstairs again a moment later. I stood alone in the kitchen. The wine was still in the glasses. She hadn't poured them out after all. I walked over and picked one up. Still warm. Still fresh. I looked into the sink, only 1 fork, sure, but there were 2 plates in the dishwasher. Both recently rinsed. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. I hadn't told her I was coming home. But maybe someone else had. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing, wondering if I was going crazy. She curled up beside me like nothing had changed. She even talked about work the next morning, her team, some new project, laughing at a joke her manager made. But every word sounded like it came from a script. Not one line out of place. And I couldn't stop staring at the second glass of wine. That night, after Jenna fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the dark pressing down like it knew something I didn't. She was beside me, breathing slow and even, curled toward the window like nothing about that day had been unusual. But I couldn't stop my mind from looping through everything, the glasses, the robe, the faint trace of unfamiliar perfume. Most people think betrayal hits you like a hammer, fast, blunt, impossible to miss. But that's not how it was for me. It was slower, stranger. Like being in a room where the wallpaper had always been one color and suddenly you realize it's a shade off and you start wondering if it had ever been the color you thought it was to begin with. I kept thinking about the wine glasses. About how casual she was, how practiced it felt, like she'd rehearsed that moment 100 times in her head, just in case. That calm didn't come from surprise. It came from control. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that moment wasn't an anomaly. It was part of a larger pattern I had chosen not to see. The signs had been there. I just hadn't connected them. There was that new perfume. I first noticed it about 2 months back, light, airy, nothing like the spicy, warm scent she'd worn for years. I had even commented on it once, half-joking, asking if she was trying to impress someone at work. She laughed it off, said it came in a sample box she got from a friend. I let it go. Then there were the workouts. Jenna had always been proudly anti-gym. She said yoga was enough and that she'd never be the kind of person who obsessed over protein shakes or spin classes. But one day, she came home in full athletic gear, leggings, a sports bra, hair tied back like she'd walked straight off a fitness blog. She claimed her company was running a wellness incentive, something about subsidized personal training sessions. I didn't ask too many questions. I even teased her, called her Gymna, for a week. She didn't laugh. Looking back, it wasn't just the workouts, it was the way she started showering immediately when she came home. The way she locked the bathroom door when she never used to. And her phone, that was another shift I ignored. Jenna used to be careless with it. It'd buzz across the table and she wouldn't even glance at it. But now it was always face down. Always on silent. She started using a passcode, not fingerprint, not facial recognition, a full numerical code she typed in like it was second nature. I asked her once about the change. She said it was because of some data breach at work. Better safe than sorry, she told me. But even then, something about the way she avoided eye contact made me feel like I was the data being protected. There was also the black car. That memory hit me like a drop of water finally falling from a full ceiling. A few weeks ago, I had come home from a grocery run, and in the parking lot of our building, I saw her standing beside a black BMW. She was leaning into the passenger window, smiling. Laughing. It wasn't a work laugh. It wasn't the polite chuckle she gave to strangers. It was full, warm, like the kind you save for someone who makes you feel seen. When she spotted me, she straightened so fast I thought she might pull something. That was just a neighbor, she said, waving it off when I asked. He needed directions. I'd believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her. Because what's the alternative? That your wife of 6 years is lying to your face while standing 10 feet away from the truth? Now, in the dark, I started pulling thread after thread. I remembered the new underwear I found while folding laundry, lacy, expensive, not her usual style. She claimed it was a gift to herself after a rough quarter. Every woman deserves to feel pretty, she said, kissing me on the cheek. I remembered how she stopped asking about my trips. Jenna used to be full of questions whenever I traveled, what city I was in, who I met, what the hotel was like. Now she barely acknowledged my itineraries. I told myself it was just life wearing us down. People grow apart, sure. But now I wondered if the distance wasn't natural at all. Maybe she had simply redirected her curiosity elsewhere. There were messages too. Or rather, the absence of them. On previous trips she'd send me updates. Pictures of the dog doing something stupid. Selfies from the couch. Random, miss you texts. But this time? A few generic replies. Nothing more. Like she was filling space, not a conversation. I chalked it up to stress. She was busy. I was away. No big deal. Except now it was. It was a very big deal. The human brain is a master at filtering out pain. It tells you not to look too hard, not to ask too many questions. It whispers, don't ruin what you have. And so you look away. You rationalize. You cling to the idea that the people you love would never hurt you unless you gave them a reason. But sometimes they do it anyway. and the silence around it is almost worse than the act itself. I turned on my side and looked at Jenna. She was still asleep, mouth slightly open, arms tucked under the pillow. She looked peaceful, innocent. But I couldn't stop replaying everything, the wine glasses, the perfume, the bathrobe, the disappearing affection. Was it Ray in the black BMW? Was she seeing him while I was gone? While I was asleep in the next room? I didn't have answers. Only a mounting pile of questions that felt too heavy to hold all at once. I wanted to shake her awake and ask. I wanted her to lie to me again, just so I could hear the tone of her voice and decide whether I still recognized it. But I didn't move. I stayed still. Because something deep inside me, the same part of me that had ignored all those signs, was now certain of one thing. This wasn't in my head. Something had changed. And I wasn't imagining it anymore. A week passed. 7 days of pretending to believe things I didn't. 7 days of nodding through Jenna's stories, her jokes, her perfectly timed affection. I went to work. I made small talk. I kissed her goodnight like nothing inside me was falling apart. But I was watching. Quietly. Closely. The more normal she acted, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on what normal even meant. It's strange how a person can smile at you like they always have, and suddenly that smile feels like a performance. Every touch felt measured. Every word rehearsed. The worst part was how seamless it all was. She didn't miss a beat. If she was lying, she had mastered the art of it so well that even the lies felt comforting. But I couldn't keep floating in that purgatory of half-truths. I needed something real, not gut feelings or vague red flags, but actual proof. Not so I could confront her. Not even because I thought she'd finally admit it. I just needed to stop gaslighting myself. One night, around 1 a.m., I got out of bed while she slept. I moved slowly, carefully, my feet pressing against the cold floor like I was afraid the house might wake up and scold me. Jenna had fallen asleep with her arm flung across my chest, like she wanted to stake a claim on the space between us. I waited until her breathing grew steady. When I was sure she was out, I slipped her arm off gently and walked to the office. Her laptop was there, plugged in and humming quietly on the desk. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. My hands were already sweating, my heart thudding in my ears like I was a teenager sneaking into something forbidden. But this wasn't teenage curiosity. This was survival. I opened the lid. The screen lit up instantly. No password. Just a desktop full of folders and a background photo of the two of us from a trip to Maine 3 summers ago. We were smiling in that picture. My arm around her, her head tilted toward me like we were built to fit that way. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to remember what that day had actually felt like. I opened the browser. Nothing suspicious, just news sites, Pinterest boards, a few shopping tabs. I moved to her email. Gmail. The inbox was clean. A little too clean. No clutter, no promos, no personal messages. She was the kind of person who let things pile up, receipts, reminders, newsletters she never read. But now it was tidy, filtered, minimal. Almost like she'd started over. Or was hiding something. That's when I clicked on the drafts folder. At first, it looked empty. But one draft sat at the bottom. Untitled. No subject line. I clicked. It opened with, "Hey babe," followed by a short message written like a whispered conversation. She thanked him, Ray, for last Thursday. She said she couldn't stop thinking about the motel, how the room smelled like pine and cheap soap, and how that made it feel even more exciting. She wrote that she missed how he looked at her when she laughed and how she didn't have to explain herself around him. She signed it with a heart emoji and her first initial. Below the message was an attachment. I hovered over it, hesitated, then clicked. The image took a second to load. When it did, its asterisk ked all the air out of the room. It was Jenna, standing in front of a mirror in what looked like a motel bathroom. The wallpaper was pale green with a faded floral pattern. She was wearing pale blue lingerie I'd never seen before. The kind of thing you don't just buy on a whim. Her expression wasn't sultry or fake. She was smiling soft, open, like she was letting someone see the real version of her. It wasn't posed. It wasn't ironic. It was int asterisk mate. There was no caption. No filter, just her, and that unfamiliar room. I sat back, hands still on the mouse, as the reality of it slammed into me. This wasn't emotional distance. This wasn't a midlife crisis or artistic expression or any of the excuses I'd spun in my head. This was a different life. Private, deliberate one. And I wasn't in it. She had chosen someone else, in action, in secrecy, in tenderness. She had carved out a version of herself that I wasn't allowed to see. And the worst part? She was good at it. seamless, as if betrayal had become second nature. I closed the draft without deleting it. I didn't want to tip her off. I didn't even know what I planned to do next. Confront her? Leave? Pretend I never saw it and slowly detach? I turned off the laptop and sat in the dark office for a long time. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I heard a car pass outside. A dog barking faintly in the distance. Jenna shifted in bed upstairs. A soft thump, a sigh, the creak of the mattress as she turned over. I could have gone up there. I could have stormed into the bedroom and demanded answers. Asked her why. Begged her for the truth. But what would that change? I already knew. There's something strange about catching someone in the act without them knowing they've been caught. It's like being on stage in a play where you're the only one who knows the ending. Every line they deliver feels hollow. Every gesture artificial. They're reciting lines, and you're just waiting for the curtain to drop. The next morning, she made me coffee. She stood at the stove in her robe, the same one from that night I came home early, humming to herself. She asked if I wanted eggs or just toast. I said toast. She smiled. Told me she'd bought that sourdough I liked from the farmer's market. As she slid the slices into the toaster, she asked about my schedule for the day. And all I could do was sit there and nod, pretending to be a man who didn't already know he was being replaced. I watched her butter the toast and place it on a plate with care. She even sprinkled a bit of sea salt on top, like she used to back when things were new. She brought it over, kissed me on the forehead, and walked back to the kitchen like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. That morning, I took a bite of toast and tasted nothing. I waited 2 more days. Not because I wanted to, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I needed to be sure not just of what I saw but of what I felt. I needed time to process the distance between what was real and what I had convinced myself was real for months. Those 2 days were the slowest in my life. Every conversation with Jenna, every passing touch or moment of laughter felt like walking through wet cement. I responded when she spoke. I smiled when she made jokes. But I was detached, watching myself move through scenes I no longer believed in. By the end of the second day, I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Thursday. She was in the living room, stretched out on the couch in leggings and a sweatshirt, her laptop balanced on her knees. Some documentary was playing on TV, background noise more than anything. I stood in the hallway for a while, just watching her. Not in a romantic way, in a scientific way, like I was observing something under a microscope. I tried to remember the last time I had looked at her without affection, without love clouding the edges. "Can we talk?" I said. She looked up immediately, blinking like she hadn't realized I was standing there. "Yeah, of course." She closed her laptop and sat up, legs crossed beneath her. "What's up?" I sat across from her, heart pounding, palms already sweaty. I had practiced this moment in my head a dozen times, and every version of it had ended differently, with shouting, with crying, with silence. But none of those fantasies had felt this hollow, this quiet. "I opened your laptop the other night," I said. No build-up, no pleasantries. I saw the draft email to Ray. Her expression didn't change at first. Just a blink, a small tilt of the head, like she was processing what I said in pieces. Then she gave a short, almost amused breath, not quite a laugh, just a release of air. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said finally. "No, I wasn't." We sat in silence for a few seconds. I waited for her to say more, to explain, to apologize, but she just looked at me, her face oddly composed. "You think I'm cheating on you," she said. "I know you are." My voice came out flatter than I expected. "You don't send pictures like that to a coworker. You don't thank someone for a motel night unless you share the bed." She looked down at her hands, then back at me. Her mouth moved like she was about to speak, then stopped. When she finally did talk, her voice was soft. "Careful. It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "You're going to say it was a joke?" She nodded. Slowly. "Actually, yeah. It was a joke. Or, more specifically, a project." That stopped me. I blinked. "A project? I'm part of a performance group online," she said. "We explore emotional boundaries through roleplay. Fictional scenarios. Kind of like immersive theater, but digital." That email, the photo, the language, it was part of a concept I've been working on. The idea is to explore how people react to the appearance of infidelity. It's experimental. I stared at her. You're telling me you fake cheated for art? Yes, she said, and her voice didn't even waver. It was all fabricated. Ray's not real? The motel image was staged. I used a friend's Airbnb. I wanted to see how far I could push a narrative before it felt too real. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So the lingerie, the photo, the message, all for some performance art thing? Exactly, she said. It's about testing the line between in asterisk Macy and fabrication. Challenging the viewer's assumptions. You were never supposed to see it. I stood up, pacing the room in disbelief. You wrote an email to a fake person, thanking him for sleeping with you. You attached a photo of yourself in lingerie standing in a motel bathroom. And I'm supposed to believe that's performance. She shrugged. It's supposed to provoke a reaction. That's the point. It's about trust, illusion, emotional responses. If you're feeling shaken, that's the art working. I sat back down harder than I intended. Do you hear yourself? It's not personal, she said. It's thematic. I almost laughed. So it's not cheating because it was conceptual? She looked offended now. You're simplifying it. No, I said, you're complicating it so much that it stops being human. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get it. No, I said. I don't understand how someone can take something that in asterisk mate, that raw, and wrap it in a bow and call it a stunt. It's not a stunt. You hid it from me. Because you wouldn't have understood. That's not art, Jenna. That's just lying with extra steps. She folded her arms. So what now? You think this is the end? Over one misunderstanding? It's not a misunderstanding, I said. It's clarity. She stared at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle that refused to fit together. You're seriously going to leave over this? Yes, I said calmly finally. I am. You'd throw away our marriage because you misunderstood a concept piece? I shook my head. No, I'm walking away because you don't see what you've done. You're not sorry. You're not even aware. Jenna stood, frustrated now, moving to the window like she needed to escape the room without leaving it. You always need things to be black and white. But life doesn't work that way. Art doesn't work that way. This isn't about art, I said. It's about trust. You told a story with your body, your words, your image, and the story was, I love someone else. Whether the person was real or not doesn't matter. You made it real. She looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something behind her eyes that looked like regret. Or maybe just exhaustion. I thought you'd understand, she said. That's the saddest part, I replied. That you thought I would. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked upstairs. I packed a duffel with a few clothes, my laptop, a toothbrush, and the watch she gave me 2 anniversaries ago. She didn't follow me. I think deep down she knew this wasn't a fight. It was a conclusion. Before I left, I stopped at the doorway to the living room. She was still by the window, arms crossed, the TV flickering behind her like a ghost of someone else's evening. Goodbye, Jenna. She didn't turn around. She just said, you'll regret not understanding. But I didn't. I walked out, drove away, and let the house get smaller in my rearview mirror. Because whatever it had been, art, betrayal, a concept, one thing was now painfully clear. She hadn't just tested a boundary. She had erased it. I didn't go home. I didn't drive to a hotel. I just drove, no direction, no music, no destination in mind. The city rolled past me in a blur of streetlights and stop signs, and I barely registered any of it. I drove until the sky turned the dull gray of early morning and my phone was blinking red with battery warnings. Eventually, I ended up in front of my brother's apartment building. Kyle answered the door half asleep, rubbing his eyes and muttering something about it being before coffee hours. But when he saw my face, he didn't ask any questions. He just stepped aside and said, couch is yours. Bathroom's clean. Coffee's in the tin by the fridge. That first day felt like decompression. The air in his apartment was different, lighter somehow. It smelled like laundry and old pizza boxes, and it felt like freedom. I hadn't realized how much my chest had been tightening day by day over the last year. Now that I was out, I could feel it. The ache. The bruising. The years of making myself smaller to fit someone else's definition of loyalty. I slept most of the day. When I woke up, Kyle had already gone to work, but he'd left a note on the table, help yourself to anything. Don't forget the dog hates raisins. It made me laugh for the first time in what felt like years. Over the next week, I settled into a rhythm. Wake up, walk Kyle's dog, make coffee, open my laptop, pretend to do remote work while mostly staring at spreadsheets. I answered emails. Canceled a few appointments. Told my boss I needed a week off, maybe 2. He didn't push, just asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not at first. I wasn't ready to make it real by saying it out loud. Every time I thought about explaining it, I felt a strange shame crawl up my spine. Not shame for leaving, but shame for staying as long as I did. Shame for not seeing it sooner. For needing proof when my instincts had been screaming at me for months. The funny thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just make you question the other person, it makes you question your own sanity. You start replaying everything. Every dinner, every laugh, every shared joke. You start wondering which parts were true and which parts were scripted. You wonder if the version of your life you lived was just a draft that never made the final cut. Jenna didn't reach out. No texts. No calls. No emails. I checked my inbox obsessively at first, like some part of me wanted her to fight. Not to come back, I didn't want that. But to at least acknowledge what she'd done. Instead, there was just silence. An absence shaped like her. But it wasn't just her silence that haunted me. It was everyone else's. Our friends, the people we used to host game nights with, the ones who came to our house for wine and takeout, the ones who knew our birthdays and anniversaries, they said nothing. Not a single message. Not even a hey, where have you been? Nothing. It was like I had vanished and the world politely agreed not to notice. It hurt in a way I didn't expect. I thought leaving Jenna would feel like severing one rope. But instead, it felt like being cut loose from an entire net. One night, after 2 weeks of radio silence, I got a voicemail. It was from Hannah. She and Jenna had been friends since college. They weren't best friends, not quite, but close enough to know each other's secrets. Hannah had always been warm toward me, inviting me into their conversations, asking about my work, even texting me from time to time with funny memes or updates on her disastrous dating life. The voicemail was short, hesitant, like she debated sending it for hours. Hey Scott, it's Hannah. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now, and I understand if you don't want to call me back. But I needed to say something. I should have said it a long time ago. I knew about Ray. Not everything, but enough. Jenna told me it was casual at first. I thought it was just a weird rebound thing, like a phase. I didn't think it would last. I never thought it would escalate. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to get in the middle. I'm sorry. I really am. I just thought you should know. I listened to that message 5 times before deleting it. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. Done pretending the people around me didn't know. Done believing I was the only one in the dark. Hannah had confirmed what I had suspected but couldn't quite bring myself to accept. It wasn't just Jenna who betrayed me. It was everyone who saw the cracks and decided it wasn't their problem. Jenna had built a private world for herself. But what made it real, what made it last, was the quiet agreement of others to let her keep it. I don't know what I expected from Hannah. An apology? Redemption? Some twisted form of closure? What I felt instead was clarity. Finally, I had language for the thing I'd been grieving. It wasn't just the marriage that broke. It was the circle. The shared laughs, the friendships, the feeling of being seen, they were all part of a system that relied on pretending. And I wasn't willing to pretend anymore. That weekend, I blocked Jenna's number. I unfollowed everyone in that group chat we used to be a part of. I even deleted the album of shared photos we kept on my phone. Not out of spite, but because I didn't want to carry those memories around like unpaid debts. They didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to a different version of me, a man who trusted blindly, who laughed easily, who didn't know that silence could be a kind of violence. Kyle and I talked more after that. He wasn't the most emotional guy and never had been, but he knew how to listen. We'd sit on the balcony some nights, beers in hand, and just be. No forced therapy sessions. No awkward reassurances. Just 2 brothers watching the skyline and letting the quiet speak for itself. One night, after I told him about the voicemail, he said something that stuck with me. Some people hold the knife. Others just look away. Hurts the same. That's when I decided to stop mourning the version of my life that everyone else had signed off on. The one where I was the stable one, the forgiving one, the loyal one. The version where I waited for people to do the right thing while quietly bleeding out behind a smile. They didn't deserve that version of me. And I didn't deserve to keep carrying it. That week, I started making plans. I called a lawyer. Got the ball rolling. Told Jenna, through her attorney, that I wanted a clean split. No mediation. No bargaining. Just closure. She didn't argue. Of course she didn't. She'd already said her piece in lace and pixels and half-truths dressed as intellectual exercises. And now it was my turn to say mine. Not with words. With distance. With action. With the knowledge that walking away wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I had ever done. A month into the legal process, I logged into our shared bank account to check balances. That's when I saw it zeroed out. Every dollar gone. Jenna had drained it, moved the funds to a private account I'd helped her open years ago, just in case, she'd once said. I stared at the screen, breath shallow. It wasn't illegal. Technically, the account was in her name. But morally? It was theft. A quiet, final betrayal. I searched the apartment one more time out of habit and found a note tucked in the drawer by the bed. In it, she blamed me, claimed I'd grown cold, distant. Said she did what she had to for herself. I didn't respond. I froze the other accounts, called the lawyer, and signed the paperwork. I wasn't chasing her anymore. She could keep the story she told herself. I had my own truth now. And it didn't include her. 6 months later, I was living in Austin. New apartment, new rhythm. I took up running at sunrise. Adopted a dog from the shelter. Started remote consulting work. The nights were quiet, sometimes too quiet, but they didn't hurt anymore. I kept waiting for the dreams to stop, and when they didn't, I made peace with them. Her laugh, our kitchen, the old familiar scent of vanilla, ghosts that visited less and less. One evening, sipping tea on the porch with the dog asleep at my feet, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe. I was free. She'd called it performance art. A harmless joke. But it cost us everything. And somehow, through the wreckage, I'd found a version of myself I hadn't met in years, whole, honest, and finally mine.